Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Marketing, Management, and Money. I'm your host, Ryan Murray.
And I'm your host, Ryan Owens.
Hey, it is awesome to have you guys with us. We appreciate all of our listeners, all of our subscribers. And if you like the show, tell a friend. We love when you share the love and help us out a little bit so that we can keep creating wonderful content to talk about and discuss. So, Ryan, I wanna kind of go into a space today that it can be a sore spot if you've ever been in this situation.
Okay,
I'm
intrigued.
I'm not talking about you specifically, but
Okay.
when an entrepreneur finds
Sure.
themselves in this situation, it can be tough, and
Okay.
that is. You've got a failing business, and when do you let go? At what point are you giving up, and at what point are you being smart and not just holding on forever to something that's dying? And
Yeah.
I'm going to kick it off with an example that I've actually shared previously, but it's such a wonderful example. I shared this example when I talked about zombie businesses and cash flow. And if you haven't had a chance to check out that episode, it's one of our most popular episodes. I think it's just because we talk about zombies.
Yeah, probably. A little bit of clickbait.
Yeah,
Oops.
Exactly.
Sorry, but thanks.
But in this example, so there's an entrepreneur, and I was talking to him. He came to one of my business plan classes that I was putting on. And after the class, he came up and he's like, "Oh, great information. I loved everything you were talking about. Thanks so much for sharing." And we started talking a little bit. I'm like, "Oh, tell me about your business." And he had a retail shop on Main Street, and I kind of asked him. I'm like, "Oh, okay, how are things going?" And you could tell by his demeanor that things were not going well. And
Sure.
I've met with enough entrepreneurs that
You can read their body language well enough to know.
yeah, you start suspecting some common symptoms, right?
Sure.
And so, I just asked him, I'm like, seems like your business is struggling a little bit. He's like, yeah, it is. And I'm like, are you making a profit? No, I'm not making a profit. And I kind of suspected that. I'm just like, it seems like you're not making a profit. And I'm like, how long have you been going without making a profit? And he's like, well, we're in our 7th year.
Jeez, man.
And as a small business, that's a long time because something else is coming in and subsidizing
Some way. Yeah.
some way, somehow.
Right.
And, so when do you let go? When do you say, okay, enough is enough?
That's such a tough question for me because oftentimes I fall victim to, or I sympathize strongly with those who are in that situation where it's like, man, it becomes so sentimental. It's like, oh gosh, you've invested so much, and what if you could just hang on, and what if this happens? And I fall right into that category of holding out hope. You know what I mean? Pushing for the next thing, trying to force something to work, to make something work. But yeah, I think for me, it's just, I think there comes a point where you're aware that you're not making smart decisions, and you haven't made smart decisions for a long time, and
I don't know.
And you're just out of energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see what you're talking about, but so let me give another example of a situation where, so I'm working with this entrepreneur, and I could tell that her business was failing, and it was putting strain on her. It was putting strain on her family, financial strain, mental, emotional strain.
Yeah.
Like this was a bad situation. And so I said to her, I'm like, I don't want to be a naysayer. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I'm going to tell you, having lots of experience, knowing what to look for in a healthy business, you need to just pull the plug. You need to pull the plug and you need to walk away. And, she's like, yeah, I've been thinking about that, but I kind of want to give it enough time. And I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. You want to give it enough time. I'm like, how much time are you going to give it? Well, I want to wait and see what next week brings. And that right there is a trap. And I asked her, I'm like, okay, what are you waiting for next week? Like, what's going to happen next week that isn't happening today? She's like, well, if things pick up. I'm like, okay, define if things pick up. Like, do you have to have a certain number of sales, a certain number of customers, a certain number of leads? Like, what specifically is it? And that's the trap that I want our listeners to avoid, is getting in this situation where there's always tomorrow. I mean, I could go into Broadway if I...
Yeah.
I won't sing it.
Oh, come on. I've sang on here before.
But so if you're saying, okay, let's see what next week brings, give yourself some
specificity.
Yes, specificity is a great word.
And that's kind of what I didn't come out and say it for sure, but that's kind of what I was alluding to, is like, you got to have something specific that you're shooting for, or something specific that you can do. And that's something that I failed to put on that, was the timeline. I really like that approach, is like, okay, how much time are you going to give this? Well, I want to wait and see however long it takes to do this. No.
Yeah.
There are some magical things that can happen within constraints. One of those magical things is some clarity on the fact that you need to shut down your business.
Right. And it's not a loss to shut down your business. I want to get to that. But before we get to that, when we're talking about constraints, I'm going to draw a hard line here. And I want to see what you think about this.
Sure.
So for me, if I'm working with a business and they say, okay, if by the end of the quarter, if we haven't seen an increase of, $10,000 in sales by the end of the quarter, then we cut it off. For me, if you get $9,973, you didn't hit 10,000.
Right.
And you cut it off.
Yeah.
And that's hard, because people are like, oh, but I mean, that's basically 10. Like, we were there. And I'm like, then you should have put your threshold at 9,000.
Yeah.
If the threshold is at 10,000, you hold it at 10,000. If that's too high of a threshold, drop it down. I mean, you can give yourself, you can say, look, so long as I'm growing, I'll stay in business. Even if I'm losing money, if I'm growing, I'll stay in business.
Right.
Fine. I'm okay with that. But, I think you draw a hard line and you stick to it.
And I don't want to be the guy that's always like, oh, it depends. But I mean, granted, that varies vastly from situation to situation, right?
Okay.
But I think I would say that you're right. I would tend to agree with you on the basis that if you're already feeling like your business isn't going well and you've already tried X, Y, and Z, and this is like, already going down that road of, well, we're going to see what next quarter brings. And that's like your end all be all. That's your ultimatum. If that's your ultimatum, it's $10,000 and you hit 999, whatever.
9,900.
Yes. I knew I was off there.
You were starting to hit $990,000. I'm like, well, then you're okay.
Yeah. Right. So no, if you hit $9,999.99, this is your last ditch effort, man. Like, you drew the line, call it. Just be done.
Yeah.
For heaven's sakes. Like, at some point, you're just beating yourself to death.
Yeah. It's like a good poker player. I mean, know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Oh, you're so cute. I as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, he's going to say it. He won't sing it, but he's going to say it.
I'm gonna see how many songs I can
Yeah.
I can tuck into this episode.
Right on.
It'll be like a Where's Waldo, except for the audio version.
Yeah. It's like Pitch Perfect riff off.
Yeah.
Jeez. Anyway.
So
No. Please, sir, by all means, continue.
I was just going to move forward and go to, I made a pretty bold statement of saying, if you call it, that's not a loss.
Sure.
And I really want to talk about that. Is it
that's
a
what I was
bad
gonna go with.
thing to, walk away from a business, even if you lose money?
Again, I think at some point there's this, you might be losing money, but if you have constantly been losing money for the last 10 months or 7 years, if you haven't been profitable for 7 years, like, quit it. Like, go somewhere else. Start making money.
Yeah.
Quit losing money. You know what I mean?
So I had a personal experience.
Sure.
I launched a marketing company. Oh boy. 10-ish years ago, maybe 8 years ago. I don't remember exactly when. It's been several years. And one of the reasons why I don't remember when is because it didn't last very long.
Yeah.
It lasted a couple of months. I sunk some money into it. In that couple of months, I probably burned through pretty close to 20 grand. And there was this weird fluke. It was completely out of my control. So I hired a web company to design my website, and they, while they were developing the website, they went in, and you can code your sites, or like if you're using WordPress, it's just a click. But you can code your sites to block search engines from searching the sites.
Yep.
Now, whether the search engines respect that or not, but most of the time they do.
Sure.
So because we were developing this website, they went in and coded it so that it wasn't searchable. Well, they forgot to turn it back on. And, so we launched this site, and we're dumping money into, getting out there, and we're seeing horrible results. And I'm like, what is going on? And after about a couple weeks, they came to me and they said, we noticed that we did this. And I mean, I was furious, absolutely furious.
For sure.
They took zero responsibility. Like
Jeez.
they did no refund. They did nothing. And I found out now. Here I'm going to tuck a little nugget in. I hired a company that was in a different state.
Sure.
And I reached out to an attorney and I said, "Look, this clearly was their fault. They admitted that it was their fault. I need to go after them for some damages." And the attorney said, "You will spend far more chasing them than you'll ever get out of them, because you're going to have to prosecute them in their state. Like, you can't, you can't take care of that just in your state." And
Sure.
he's like, "Just chalk it up to experience." And it hurt,
Oh, for sure.
It really hurt. But that 2-week period of time was enough for us to have lost all the momentum that we had put into it. And we looked at it and we're like, okay, I'm calling it, And so we walked away for about a year and a half. And what also smarts was, I was still consulting businesses at the time. And it's hard to show up the next day and be like, "Yeah, I'm going to consult you. By the way, I just failed on mine."
Yeah.
But the thing that was so
I just
good,
closed the doors, but let me tell you what to do.
No. But the thing that was so good was, because I had lost big,
Right.
I started really thinking about the advice that I was giving other entrepreneurs. I became such a better business consultant because I learned the hard way, the painful way.
Yeah.
I lost money in a business. And to this day, I will not get into a business deal with anyone who has never lost money on a business, because it changes you. It took me about a year and a half before I was ready to launch out on my own again, doing my own business, because I was burned. I was burned
Yeah.
pretty hard, and so you feel it. It's an emotional thing to be like, I failed big.
Yeah, and then how do you move on from there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That definitely is a painful thing for sure.
And I was only playing with about 20 grand. I mean, there are people 100 grand later, $500,000 later.
Oh yeah, there are people that play with millions. Are you kidding? Have you heard of Fire Festival?
Oh, okay. And I can only imagine. I look at that and I'm just like, okay, well, that's, that hurt. And I think my pride was hurt more than my pocketbook.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. Well, but like you mentioned, there were some really cool things that you've learned from that.
Yeah.
And had you not, okay, so I'm going to kind of reverse that situation and then have you give your thoughts.
Okay.
What if you hadn't decided to call it? So
Oh, yeah.
you had taken this swing and a miss, right? And you're reeling from that, and either you by yourself or you and this partner try to continue things. So, I mean,
So
what are your thoughts around that? Like,
initially we did. We didn't call it straight away. I mean, obviously we fired that web development company.
really? How rude.
I know. It was odd. I went through 2 more web developers and it just wasn't feeling right. And I looked at it and I'm like, you know what? I can chase my tail and I can keep dumping money into this.
Sure.
But it was gone. And one of the things, and this is something that I would say to our listeners, I knew it was gone because we no longer had a plan. The plan we had put in place was demolished. We tried to come up with a new plan. Nothing was sticking. We were winging it.
Yeah.
We were making crap up
Right.
and hoping that something magical was going to happen. The fairy dust was going
Yeah.
to sprinkle down from the sky, and
Something would stick.
yeah, my fairy godmother was going to turn a pumpkin into my flourishing business. I mean, like, we were getting a little bit out there, and I'm like, no, it's time to just, cut the losses and be done.
So the rest of the episode is going to be about how much you love web developers.
Oh, I honestly, and we probably should do a full episode on, choosing a quality web developer, because there are some pitfalls out there that are easy to avoid once you know where they are.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not the only entrepreneur.
Oh, it happens all the time.
all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to pick on web developers. There's some amazing web developers
Oh, for
out
sure.
there.
Well, it's just like anything. There are those professionals out there that, if you don't, it's one of those complicated things that a lot of people don't understand. And so you throw something or you're out there looking for a web developer to contract with, and they're like, oh yeah, the HTML5 code, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, I'll take it.
Right.
And you pull out of the parking lot and the wheels fall off and no refund because you had it out of the parking lot.
Exactly.
So for sure that happens within every industry, I think. But yeah, that'd be a good episode. We should, take a look at that.
Yeah.
So last thing I want to touch on is once you, maybe you have other thoughts here, but once you decide to close your business, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing. That's not just walk out and never look back kind of thing. There's a lot of things to consider. I mean, how do you distribute your assets? How do you
Sure.
just lay off all your employees? Do you what do you do?
And, so a couple things here. First off, we need to clearly state that we're not talking about an exit strategy.
Oh, for sure.
This is where mistakes have been made, or you misgauged the market.
You're
or,
flailing. There's no strategy.
Yeah. And, I will give this bit of comfort to entrepreneurs out there. Most entrepreneurs have failed 3, 4, 7 times.
Oh, at least.
And so it's more common to fail than it is to succeed.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you've got to fail a handful of times before you know what you're doing to be successful. You know, if I expected every baby to just start walking and never fall, I mean, when you see a toddler, they're called toddlers because they toddle, they teeter, you know? I mean, that's what they're named after. And you look at them and they look like their parents just abuse the crap out of them because they
Jeez.
fall all the time.
Idiot babies. Babies are so dumb.
Right. And that's the thing is, but once they finally figure it out, they're running everywhere.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But there's that 3 or 4 months where it's all sketchy. They know
Nothing but fumbles.
yeah. They know where they want to get, but they just don't know how to get there. And
For sure.
and so, you know, we're talking about that situation where it's like, okay, no, you just fell. And the first thing that I would say is keep your head in the game. Don't lose focus. Don't get overly emotional. You know, like with me, my pride was hurt. And fortunately, I was able to brush off enough of my ego that I could still move forward without, you know, I mean, we sunk another couple grand into it before we're like, okay, this is a sinking ship. Let's, you know, time to get on the lifeboat.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, so you got to check the ego at the door. You've got to rely on the advice of those around you. Now, if this is a serious situation, and by serious, I mean that there are employees whose livelihood just got
Demolished. Decimated.
You know, you need to be getting professional counsel to clearly dissolve this business properly.
Right.
If it's just you and you know, like in the situation of me, it was me and a partner. We just had our own money invested into it. We didn't have any employees. And so what we did is we just went item by item. You know, we liquidated what we could, which wasn't much. We cut ties on a lot. I mean, there were a lot of things that we just paid the penalties on. You know, I paid the penalty on leaving my lease early, and I'm just like, well, it's cheaper than staying in that
Dragging
lease.
it out.
You know, and so there were some things where we just you know, cut it off.
Yeah.
And it was tough. It was very tough.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
So I think that that this is what I would say to, you know, businesses out there. If you're struggling, step one is give yourself some thresholds. You know, we talked about putting that dollar amount with a time frame. You
Get
gotta
specific.
Get specific. Yeah, that's step one. Step two is be willing to walk away when the time comes. And step three is don't give up. Like, just because you walked away from that business, now you know a whole lot more about running a business. This is a great time to start looking at the next entrepreneur venture that you need. For me, it took me about 1.5 years before I was ready to do that. You know, so this isn't like, okay, next week, you know.
I was going to say, even if it takes a little bit of time to heal and come back from that, then it's definitely worth it. It's definitely something, like you said, keep your head in the game, you know, go sit on the sideline, take a breather for a minute, get some water if you need to, but ultimately,
Right.
and come back to it. You went there for a reason. Don't give up.
Yeah.
So that's probably right before we wrap up, that's probably one of the hardest things for me to see on places like LinkedIn is you see somebody in their experience where they've clearly started their own business, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've gone out on their own and it went for a year and a half, whatever. And then their next position is that they've been there for like 12 years. Or they've had 2 or 3 positions where, you know, a total of 10 or 12 years has gone by. And it's just like, oh, man, you were right there. Just keep going. Push a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, take some time, but come back. All right. And with that, we're going to wrap up our episode today. We hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Take care.